Now, I did have a long and grandiose introduction to our next speaker, the keynote speaker for today's event, but we've overrun a bit. So instead, what I'm going to do is put your hands together and say welcome to our keynote speaker, Mark Drakeford, MS First Minister of Wales.
Wel, pnawn da. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am y wahoddiad. Pleser I fod yma da chi gyd. Thank you all very much indeed for the chance to be with you this afternoon. It is a huge privilege to be able to be with you to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Disability Wales, stemming from its origins, as you all know, in 1972, and the Wales Council for the Disabled. 50 years in any organisation is a huge achievement. And throughout the whole of the devolution era, Disability Wales has been there as one of those key partners that the Senedd and the Welsh Government has had. And this afternoon is a real opportunity to put that on the record. Our enormous thanks and appreciation of everything that you do and the way in which we have been able to work together. Now, you know that I've been asked to speak to you on the theme of liberating disabled people's lives and rights here in Wales. And I was very pleased indeed to see that remit, because the word liberation by itself returns us to the roots of the whole movement and the 1960s, which some of us, of course, remember better than others, because that era was a time when that sense of liberation was a powerful uniting thread between so many different groups in our society, whether it was women in the gender movement, whether it was black people in the race movement, whether it was people in the very beginnings of the gay and lesbian movement, and of course the liberation struggle amongst disabled people as well. An assertive struggle to establish and to demand the rights of disabled people to live their lives as full and contributing citizens of Wales, in our case, and the wider United Kingdom. Now, we live in very tough times, and I'll come back to a bit of that towards the end. But one of the things we sometimes don't do as much as we ought to do in tough times is to remember that over that 50 years, a great deal has changed for the better, and that the reason that things have improved is because they were pioneers, people who devoted their lives to making that liberation struggle a success. And I'm very struck when I go, as I try to go every year, to Black History Month. There is a real strong strand now in the way that that movement thinks about its history, in making sure that those pioneering people who played such a significant part in the development of the movement, that they are recognised and that people connect with the history of their own movement, the 50-year history, in the case of Disability Wales. And I think the reason why there is that renewed interest in remembering the work of those who went before us is because it is one of the ways in which, in really tough times, we can take confidence from the struggles that they endured, the ground that they gained, and the platform that it creates for us today to go on and do more in order to build upon the legacy that they have left us. Now, I use the term earlier on a liberation movement. And I use the term movement very deliberately because while remembering the contribution of individuals to that 50-year history we are thinking about this afternoon is really important, what we are celebrating is not just the contribution of isolated individuals. We are celebrating the achievements of a movement that has always been committed to the power of collective experience. That understanding, and it's a very easy understanding here in Wales because it's the way we live so many other parts of our lives. That understanding that we always achieve more when we act together, and that when we are able to craft collective solutions to common problems, then those solutions do the most in the lives of those people who needed that help in the first place. That's the difference between an approach which relies on a sense of the common and the collective, as against an approach that thinks that liberation is achieved simply by making sure that individuals are able to make the most of their own chances. We want that to happen, of course, but we also want to make sure that as Disability Wales does, it brings those people together, and it's the collective experience, the collective voice, and the collective determination that makes a difference in an even larger number of lives. And I think that what we are talking about this afternoon is not just a movement either. It is a social movement, because the liberation that we're talking about is a liberation from all those aspects of daily life that cause people to be disabled. A liberation from the belief that the problem lies with the person, and a recognition instead that the problem rests in the wider social context in which those lives are lived out. And I want to reaffirm today the commitment of the Welsh Government, as it has been there almost throughout the whole of the devolution period, to the social model of disability, and to the ongoing efforts that have to be made even after all those years to spreading an understanding of what we mean by the social model, and not just an understanding of it, but that we make that additional effort to make sure that from understanding comes real action that makes a difference. Now, a great deal of the work that is going on to develop the understanding and to create the actions that flow from the social model of disability come through the work of the Disability Task Force. And that's a very important part of the work of this latest Senedd term. It's jointly chaired, as you will know, by my colleague Jane Hutt. Jane was with you at the dinner last night. She sent me a text message afterwards to say how much she'd enjoyed being here and how important she regards the work that comes from the Beyond COVID-19 report and the work that the task force does, just how importantly she regards that work and how committed, as I'm sure you know, she is to seeing that through. One of the things that we have learnt that is different today, I think, to 1972, when all this started, is that we have a much, I hope, better understanding of the lived experience of people who are themselves disabled, and the way in which that lived experience has to be put to work to make sure that the efforts we make to spread understanding and to develop action, that they are properly informed by that lived experience. And that's why I'm really pleased that Mick Scarlett is delivering the social model sessions for Disability Wales, because if we are to make a reality of that social model of disability, then drawing on the direct experience of people who are part of this movement is one of the fundamental ways in which that difference can be made. I think it's probably true to say that in 1972, the way in which welfare services were provided were still pretty much as they had been designed in that great government of 1945, the welfare state government. And it was a great government, and we owe it a huge debt. But one of the things that we definitely think of differently today is the relationship that it envisaged between the person who uses a service and the way the service is provided. I don't think there's much doubt at all that in 1945, the expert really did think that they knew best, that the job of a teacher was to pour knowledge into the empty vessel that was the pupil, that the job of the doctor was to weave their magic over the passive object that was the patient who sat in front of them. And I think today we really do have a very different understanding of that relationship. The relationship between the person who provides the service and the person who uses the service is a relationship of equals. Both parties have expertise. The expertise is different, but the expertise is equally valuable and equally necessary in order to make the progress that that encounter is designed to make. We use the word co-production. Probably, we've used it a bit to death, and we don't get quite the value out of it that we once had. But for me, co-production is a word that sums up the sense that people who use services are assets, not problems to be solved. That they come to the table with all sorts of things that only they can contribute. People are experts in their own lives. They know how things can work or not work in a way that the person providing the service, who will have very important expertise of their own, will not know. And the way in which you get the best outcomes for people is when you combine those different sets of expertise in a relationship that is a relationship of equals, in which both parties recognize the vital importance of what the other person is also contributing. And that's why, as I say, that in 2022, we seek to draw on the lived experience of people in this room and in all the organizations that you will work with in a very different way than we would have done not that many years ago. And that is true of all the different strands in the task force. The action plan that the task force is charged with putting into reality, that approach, I hope, runs through it as a really important strand in the way in which we will try to make that social model of disability a reality in the lives of people here in Wales. And I'm really very pleased indeed that Rhian Davies, your chief executive and someone whose contribution to improving the lives of disabled people in Wales has been so important to us over such a period that Rhian is herself chairing one of the working groups that the task force has set up. I didn't want to end this afternoon without some reference to the nature of the times in which we live. So the COVID experience, with all the harm and all the hurt that it brought with us, has interrupted so many things that otherwise we took for granted, the plans we had, the way in which we had intended to live our lives. But as we are emerging from all of that, we now find ourselves faced with yet another set of challenges and yet another era of austerity. The impact of the mistakes that have been made by the UK government will be felt in the lives of every citizen here in Wales. Whether you are paying a mortgage that you now find is far more expensive than you had expected, whether you are affected, as almost everybody will be, by the over 14% inflation in food costs that was reported by ONS today, or whether you are one of those people who does not know today whether your pensions and your benefits are going to be uprated at least in line with inflation, as people had been promised. And at a time when inflation is galloping in the way in which it is, the thought that your income will not rise even in line with the costs that you are facing, the costs of food, the costs of heating, the costs of transport, all those things that make such a difference in the lives of people in this room and the organisations and others with whom you work. The idea that people will be asked to manage on even less than they have now is a prospect that is genuinely shocking and very frightening indeed for so many people the length and breadth of Wales. If we are to survive through the very tough months of this winter and into next year, then the only way we will do it is by drawing on all those qualities with which I started this afternoon. Those qualities that were there in 1972 amongst the people who came together to start that liberation journey. And those are the qualities of social solidarity, of looking out for one another, of pooling our resources and sharing them out again so that those people whose needs are greatest are always at the front of the queue. But beyond that, I think it really does demand a campaigning voice on behalf of those people who find themselves at the sharpest end. And that's what I mean by a liberation social movement. It is more than just attending, as we must, to the impact in the lives of individuals. It is finding a way of speaking up, and of speaking up uncompromisingly on behalf of those people who find themselves most badly affected by the mistakes that other people have made, but who are expected to bear the burden and the consequences in their lives too. All of that, I think, demands a contribution from everybody who is here this afternoon, and in all the organisations that you work in and all the other people that you represent. Working together, drawing on the great traditions of the last 50 years, I think, even in the toughest of times, gives us a way in which we can get through all of this together. I just want to say this afternoon, thank you. Thank you for everything that you have done already, and thank you for everything that you will do to help others to get through the really difficult times that lie ahead. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much indeed.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. I don't know, it's so refreshing to hear our First Minister talk about the social model and understand it and speak about it so eloquently, and you know, and I think all the work that we're all doing on the Disability Rights Task Force, you know, it's to have that commitment from Welsh Government to it, and it you know, means such a lot, and to talk about liberation as well, you know, because that is such a, you know, such an important word. I know you haven't got much time. We've got one person waiting from Pembrokeshire online to ask a question.
Of course.
Are you happy to take that?
Yeah,
so we've got Jessica in Pembrokeshire. Here she is to ask a question.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for letting me be part of the event today. I'm here on behalf of Pembrokeshire County Council, where I'm Access Officer, and work as a support for Pembrokeshire Access Group. So my question is, disabled patients like myself, particularly in rural areas, are finding it increasingly difficult to access health services such as a GP, hospital or dentist. And this can be even harder if someone like myself is unable to drive. So what could be done about this?
Well, Jessica, thank you. First of all, thank you very much indeed. And it's great to see people being able to join remotely as well as in the room. And I suppose that is part of an answer to that challenging question. COVID, as I said earlier, was, a very, very tough experience for so many people. But there are some things we learnt during that time, which I hope we will be able to go on using in people's lives. So I'm very influenced by an encounter I had in Bronglais Hospital, just north of where Jessica is today. So that's in the heart of rural Ceredigion. And I was meeting a very committed consultant who was in charge of a new dementia service that they were running out of the hospital. And he explained to me that it was a requirement of the NICE guidelines that every patient of the service had to be recalled once every year to make sure that their condition was being reassessed. And they were now in the 4th year of the service. And in the next year, he said, I will not be able to see any new patients at all, because I've now got 4 years' worth of patients, each of whom has got to come back once in the year for me to assess them. And he said, my patients live in a very scattered area. They are normally brought by their partner, who is themselves elderly, and often suffering from health conditions as well. The journey is unsettling for the person with dementia. It means an upheaval, it means a travel, it means coming to somewhere strange. People find that difficult. For what is often an encounter of no more than 10 minutes, in which I say to them at the end, well, everything seems pretty much as it was last year, and we should carry on with the plan we've already got. And today, I think we would absolutely not want to do things in that way, because we would use all the things we've learnt, being able to talk to people on a screen, to have things done remotely, in order to make sure that people who live in those more scattered and rural areas aren't asked to make those long and difficult journeys for what is a very small clinical benefit. So one of the answers to Jessica's questions is that we must go on making maximum use of the way in which new technology allows us to access services in a different way, so that you don't go all the way to a GP surgery to sit in a waiting room with a lot of other people, many of whom appear to be quite a lot more unwell than you are yourself, in order to be called in for something that you could have been told over the telephone or on the screen. So, it's not the whole answer by any means, but it is an important strand, and it's a particularly important strand in the more rural parts of Wales. The other thing we have to do is we have to find a way of going on just strengthening the volume of the service that we provide. So in dentistry, which Jessica mentioned, we have changed the contract of dentists here in Wales. It wasn't easy, because changing things never is. And we've had a very small number of dentists in the end who've chosen not to sign up to the new contract. But what the new contract allows dentists to do is, instead of earning money by calling back people for checkups at pretty regular intervals. It allows the dentist to make a clinical judgment as to which person does need to come back every 6 months and which person you can afford not to see for at least another year. And as a result of the change in the contract, 67,000 new NHS patients have been offered an appointment with a dentist in Wales since the 1st of April this year. By the time we get to the end of March, we expect that to be 126,000 new NHS patients, and that's just by changing the contract. That's by allowing the dentists, the scarce dentists we have, to use their time in a more profitable way, seeing the people who really need to be seen and doing a bit less of the way in which the previous contract sort of forced them into a lot of handle-turning work that wasn't very useful for the patient, certainly wasn't a great use of the skill of the dentist, and meant that lots of other people who really needed treatment were kept waiting for longer. So there are ways in which we can go on trying to make the most of the people that we have there already, and then always trying to find ways of growing more people here in Wales, skilled, able and willing to do the jobs we know that are there to be done in the rural parts of Wales, but in cities like Cardiff and the valley communities that surround us.
Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr. And of course, the social model approach is, that's where it comes into its own strength. You know, it is about changing the way we do things. So, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.